Let's get started. Call to order the Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 Water Sewer Commission meeting. Let's open it up to the public forum. Anybody here from the public? All right, hearing none. Let's move on to Paul, if you can do the warrants agenda for us, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as printed of October 5th, 2021.
Or a second?
I'll make a second.
All right, Peter, roll call vote.
All right, Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
Next, I'd like to make a motion to approve the following warrants. We have, first of all, Commissioner salaries, $500. McClure Engineering for waterline construction, $250. And Toshiba quarterly copier building, $25.76. Next, we have WB Mason for office supplies, $6.57. Mass Waterwork Association for our membership renewal, $80. EJ Prescott for touchpads, $115.29. Veolia for the October 2021 services, $39,096.64. Again, Veolia, this time for November 2021 services, $56,050. And again, Veolia for the remainder of the INI study, $13,129.03. Next, we have Amazon for office supplies, $27.85. And lastly, F. Mahoney for sewer valve repair, $1,499.75, all for a grand total of $110,780.89.
I'll
Second,
second that.
in discussion? Hearing none. Peter, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye. All right, moving on to scheduled appointments. 6:35, Veolia.
I believe Vinny's on to go over his MOR for November.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Vinny.
Hi, everyone. We're going to be covering the monthly operating report for October 2021. We were fully staffed through October. There was myself, Dylan Moriarty, and Patrick Adams. We completed all the monthly safety checklists. There was hand sanitizer and sorry about that. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yep, it's better now.
Sorry about that. Okay, moving on. The training, we covered crane safety for general industry and material handling safety. And I completed the high-tech operator training course, which I needed the TCHs for my drinking water licenses, so that was done. During the month of October, Charlton had 1 E. coli exceedance. The result was 1,986 MPN per 100 milliliters. We checked everything over. We couldn't really find a reason why we had the exceedance. All the bulbs were lit. There was no buildup in the troughs or anything. So I'm not sure what went on with that, whether it was a handling issue or not, but the sample before was a 1 and the sample after it was a 14. And our permit calls for a 142. So those two were well within the permit. The DMR for September was completed and submitted on October 15th. operations and maintenance activities. RBC proficiency testing, we did it 3 times during the month of October. And while we were doing the proficiency testing, we realized one of the RBCs wasn't flowing what it should have. And every time we kept trying to give it more flow, it would just kind of fill up. And when we pumped it down and looked for the reason why, we found a blockage in the effluent pipe. We drained it out and we created some head pressure on the effluent side, and it back flushed the piping for us. And when we did that, we pulled a bunch of wipes out. And after that, we returned it to normal flow, and it works good since then. On October 9th, Comag Clarifier floated a blanket, and it happened again on the 18th. And it wasn't until into November we figured out the reason why. The rake arm broke, just like what happened on Clarifier 2. And I'll get into more of that next month's meeting. On October 21st, we turned off the pack coagulant and put the plant back into using ferric as its main coagulant. The pack will stay in the system for up to a couple of months, depending on our wasting process. And even right now, as we're going, we can still see we're not completely off of the pack. October 25th, the RBC number 2 drive chain started making a lot of noise. We shut it off, inspected it, and we noticed that the chain roll they were a lot smaller in diameter than they should have been. So we ordered 2 10-foot lengths from Fastenal, and we used the town's municipal buying power to purchase those. The town gets a really good discount at Fastenal, and the RBC requires about 19 feet of chain, and there's 2 of these RBCs. To work on the project safely, we purchased 2 sections of small staging that we could set up behind the RBC. The chain weighs over 150 pounds, and it's just really awkward to get in there. So the staging made that possible safely. On October 28th, secondary clarifier number 2 wouldn't raz or waz, which means every hour we checked it, the blanket just kept getting thicker and thicker. And the blanket is the sludge at the bottom. So we decided to take it offline, and we called Slims out to pump it down for us. It took them all day to pump it down. And when we got to the bottom, we got in there with a squeegee and squeegeed every bit of stuff out of it. And we found a small piece of rubber covering the drain hole. It was a piece that was put on the clarifier at some point to block the mixing tabs. So after we found that was the problem, we took all the other pieces of rubber that could possibly fall off and took them out of the clarifier. We just didn't need them. Moving on to the collection system activities. 12 Brookside Drive, we installed a new water meter. On 10/18, we had Slim Sewer Service suck out the force main on Sunset. And there's more about that a little later in the report here. On 10/19, we used our trash pump to pump 275 gallons of clean water down Sunset's force main. On 10/26, there was a power failure in the middle of the night. The operator was called in. 3 different pump stations lost power, and he was in there at about 3 in the morning checking all the stations over. Pump station activities, we completed all the daily rounds at the MTAs, 5 East and North Main Street, and a weekly alarm testing was completed. We hauled 9 loads of sludge in the month of October. And for chemicals, we received 2 skids of lime and 2 275-gallon totes of caustic. Down to the grinder pump section, we get called out to 165 Sunset for a stuck float. The pump just kept on running. We went out, cleaned a little grease off, and it was back down the road. Later in the month, we got called back to 165 Sunset. The alarm was going off, and there was a corroded wire on the pump that had broke off. And it was just one of those things. I mean, we found it, we were going to put a new pump in, and the guy went to undo the wiring, and the wires fell apart. So we cleaned it all up, made new connections, and that's all we had to do. On 10/16, we got called out to 211 Sunset. And the discharge gasket was leaking. Every time the pump would turn on, it would spray a little from the discharge gasket, kind of washing the inside of the wet well. And I knew we were going to be trying to flush that main because I had a suspicion it was starting to plug up. So we left the pump as was until we finished our flushing exercises. On 10/18, we had Slims come out and hook up and suck out the force main, as I stated earlier. On the 19th, we replaced the pump and wired in a redundant run circuit. So if the run float fails and it gets to the alarm float, the pump will still turn on. Just recently, we discovered that 211 Sunset had a bad check valve, and we actually replaced it today. And that'll be covered more in next month's meeting. Dig safes, there were 226 of them that came into the office in the month of October. And in October, we delivered the new operations contract to the town. Veolia sent out a link for CPM offerings. It's the construction project management, and clients were invited to watch a town hall meeting on how that's offered and what it entails. And that concludes the MOR for the month of October 2021. Any questions?
You sound like any, Vinny.
All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just take a minute and thank Vinny for all the work that him and his team do around the plant. And especially for that check valve that got replaced at 211 Sunset Drive today. We got a call from a neighbor because the owners of that home are away for a little bit. And their grinder pump was kind of flowing over. And it was kind of strange to be happening when the house was empty. And that's when realized that their check valve up at the street was had failed. So the pressure line, whenever there was pressure there, was just backflowing all the way down to their grinder pump. So in the past, we've had to fix one of these before. We hired an outside contractor to come in, and it cost us quite a bit to have them do this. I happened to call Jerry Foster from the highway department, and he had some people available to dig the check valve for us, and Vinny and his guys were able to get down in there and replace that check valve. So we're able to save quite a bit today on that repair. So again, I want to thank Vinny and his guys for getting in there and doing that, and also thank Jerry Foskey and the highway department for being there to dig it for us and save us a bunch of money.
That's great. Thank you. That's a decent sized repair. Is there a check valve at every driveway?
Yes, you have one also. Yep. Every
Yep.
driveway on that pressure main has a curb stop and a check valve.
I'm assuming these people are away, that somebody checked the inside of their house to make sure that there wasn't an issue inside.
We checked the best we could, and there didn't seem to be an issue on the inside. I've done what I could to try and find contact information for the owners, and I haven't been able to do that. But Vinny was there a prior time when the homeowner was present when something similar happened, and there was no issues inside of the home.
Okay.
So again, we did the best we could today to look in there. We could kind of see in the bottom floor and see where the bathroom was, and it didn't seem to be anything that was overflowing from there. So
All right,
it
fantastic.
should be all set.
Okay. Moving on. The ARPA funds.
Yeah, so the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan, from the federal government, the town has received approximately $4 million of these funds, and the Board of Selectmen approved about $2 million worth of spending from that allotment. And part of that is the attached study that Veolia had submitted to us maybe back in October that you had reviewed and approved. So this is what I submitted to the Board of Selectmen for approval, and they approved the fee for the engineering study of $84,153. This agreement has been executed. So I believe John can give us a quick update as to where they are with this, but I believe it's just getting started. From here, the plan of attack is once the study is done and we identify and prioritize what we should do for immediate upgrades to the plant, we'll go back in front of the Board of Selectmen, share this report with them, and ask them to go ahead and fund it further with the remaining $2 million or a portion of that $2 million that they have left. So I think we're in a good place here. I'm kind of excited to see what comes out of this study. As John has mentioned in the past, this isn't just a 30-page study we're looking to get a little booklet for and put on the shelf. This is something that we want to be actual action items that we'll be able to kind of move forward with and have actual results that will make operating the plant better and more efficient.
Yeah, that's right, Pete. The whole purpose of this is to really be targeted in what they're looking at to really address what we know are the key, pinch points for the project, and that's around nitrogen removal, the headworks, and then our issues with chemical storage and handling of the facility. You will get out of that, plans and specs as well. So it's really not even just a report. It'll actually be something that you could then take on the street and get quotes to actually perform the work. So really looking forward to that. I know we had that kickoff meeting with Wright Pierce and Hans at the plant. And I know Wright Pierce now that the agreement's been executed is underway with their evaluation. And that should take a couple months, but by, I would say, the beginning of spring, Peter, we should be in good shape, be able to provide some really concrete recommendations for improving the overall capacity and resiliency of the plant.
Fantastic.
Great. So I just want to provide an update on that and where we are with it. So we're moving forward slowly but surely. And lastly, I'd like you to consider purchasing flow meters with our I&I budget line item. These flow meters will allow us to monitor the flow at certain spots in real time to try and identify where the additional flow may be coming from after major rain events. These flow meters will be able to be moved as we determine based on data that is collected. I have 2 quotes for the flow meters. The first is from Hvac, and with Veolia's discount, we can purchase each flow meter equipment and service for $4,716.41, and that's a 45% discount. A comparable unit from EJP I got prices for would cost us $13,485. So I attached quotes for both just so you could see kind of the benefit of Veolia's buying power and what we can get the discounted meters for. So if this is something that you'd be interested in doing, I'd ask you to approve $14,400 to purchase 3 flow meters and equipment and the service agreement from Hvac. And then we can work with Paul Rodman from Veolia, who has been an integral part of our last 3 years of I&I studies to discuss where to place them initially.
I'll make a motion to approve such.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Peter, roll call vote, please.
All right, I believe Mr. Ridlack is on.
Yes, I'm on.
All right. So roll call vote, Mr. Ridlack,
Aye.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
Great, motion passes unanimously.
All right, Pete, moving on, 144 Sturbridge Road.
Yes, so we have a request from the engineers on behalf of the, I guess it's Aspen Blue Cultivation and Terps Dispensary. They are looking to locate a marijuana grow facility and retail area at 144 Sturbridge Road. So they'll be repurposing that building. And they have requested to discharge approximately 629 gallons per day of grow runoff from their facility into the sewer connection. I have forwarded this request to Veolia for review, and they did not see any major areas of concern because of the low amount of daily flow. If you do consider approving this request, I would ask that we require the process waste flow to be metered separately so we can truly determine how much flow we're getting. And that the applicant should also be required to submit samples of that process flow on a weekly basis until we can establish a baseline, and then we can modify that sampling frequency as we figure out the consistency. I
How long
believe
of a
there are-
baseline do we think
It-
we should?
I go for
establish
at least 3 months, and then based on the variation, as long as the results aren't fluctuating more than 20%, we could probably drop it down to every other week. And
I would
then
have
just-
to
and then go from
imagine, Peter, just because of the nature of what this is kind of growing, I have to assume that their baseline is going to move up and down with where the process of growing the plants is at, you know, how much water usage there is.
I believe there's a couple of people on here who, from the engineering company, who's made the request. They might be able to answer that a little better than myself. If there is someone here, just go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, my name is Frank Zano. I'm the Vice President of Capital Projects for Aspen Blue. So we do have our head of cultivation on the line, Zachary Weiss, who I think would be the best to answer that question for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, so the life cycle of a plant in our facility is from start to finish is somewhere around 90 days. And as we ramp up production, you know, we'll be turning on each part of our facility one room at a time. You know, every week we'll be adding more and more. I think a 3-month period would allow us to cycle through all our rooms in our facility. Does that make sense?
Yes. So a 3-month timetable is going to go from min to max for your output,
Correct.
Per
and
room,
then
though.
the cycle will start over again.
Right. Well, once we hit max, we will maintain that cycle consistently because it's staggered in the beginning till we
Gotcha.
hit full production, and then we're constantly moving forward.
Okay. So you think in 3 months you'll hit your max and then maintain that level from here on out
Correct.
or there on out.
That's
So
the
I
plan.
would think that we need to meter the water for 6 months.
Oh, we're gonna meter the water indefinitely. Because if we see maybe high levels of BOD or anything like that, they're gonna have to pay surcharges, much like any other industrial user.
So
I'm
in
talking
a sense, we're
about
approving a
sampling.
trial basis.
Yes, I believe it will be similar to kind of what you did with Treehouse. Because of the unknowns, we go ahead and say, we're willing to accept it now. They're gonna have to find a way to, again, meter this additional flow separately. And that way there, we'll be able to see those sample results, and if there is any surcharges to be processed based on that flow, we'll do that based on the flows that are there. And we'll be able to identify what we're actually getting. So I think if they're not going to reach full production until 3 months, I think we should do weekly sampling for 6 months. And that'll give us 3 months of full production sampling to see what we're getting for actual results. And then again, depending on variation, we may be able to go down to every other week, and we might, you know, if it remains more consistent, we may be able to go down to a monthly basis. But I think that's over maybe a year to 18 months to 2 years before we get to that point.
Through the chair, if I might.
Ed Russ.
Peter, what happens if worst case scenario, 8 months into this, all of a sudden, bang, we have a situation where it's messing with the toxicity of the plant and we can't control it and we're violating left and right for different levels?
I think we have the right to deny any type of process flow that inadvertently affects the treatment plant. So
Okay.
I think I'd ask you to word this approval that it's on a trial basis to make sure, again, over the first 12 months to 2 years, that it does not have any type of adverse effect on our treatment plant.
All right. So I have a simpler approach, and it starts off as, I'll make a motion that we approve this on a trial basis with reconsideration after 3 months and reconsideration after 6 months.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion?
I
Sure,
just
just a few.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep.
Bruce.
Do you think we're covered entirely upon that motion, Peter?
I probably want to add in the sampling frequency, the sampling requirement that you're gonna, and the additional meter for that process flow, just so that it's clear in that motion.
So who is providing the meter in the situation? Are we gonna stick a meter over there?
No, the client will have to, the applicant will have to provide their own meter and put it in wherever they can, so it catches all that process flow. And they will also have to hire an independent engineer to take a sample and send that out for lab analysis.
Do they hire an independent or do they use McClure like Treehouse did for us?
Well, McClure is independent to Treehouse. Treehouse pays them, not us.
Okay,
So Treehouse could hire anybody.
sure. All right, so I will add into the motion, amend the motion to include the following. Flow meter added to check the flow, sampling to be conducted and submitted to the town. Anything else?
I think that's a good start. Paul, do you amend your second?
I'll second that part of it.
John, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Pete, I just, only thing would be, to specify what sampling parameters you want to analyze. Whether it's BOD, nitrogen, phosphorus, et cetera. Do you have that list of parameters?
I do not. I know we have what we surcharge based on, but again, I don't think this process will be generating any ammonia. So there is BOD, there's TSS, but then there's also, I believe nitrogen was a main area of concern that your team came up with, correct?
Yeah, I would think both, nitrogen and phosphorus would be of concern. Those are two particular loading concerns the plant currently has.
So I'll include the sampling specific to the list supplied by our superintendent and Viola in the next week.
Yeah, if you'd like, Pete, I could put together a table and
Okay, that'd be great.
as well as the detection limits for those parameters.
Paul, do you agree with your second?
Paul, you amended your second already, correct?
Does the applicant have any questions on, or any thoughts on what was being proposed?
No, I'm pretty clear. I mean, as long as we understand the testing parameters, I mean, and then if you wouldn't mind putting maybe it's 3 months after commencement by the CCC, just so that's in there. So there's a benchmark when it starts. That would be great.
So when you say commencement of the CCC.
Yeah, so we typically, so even if your inspectors give us a CO, there's usually a 90 to 120 day process of state approvals. So we can't start growing technically until we receive a start. Zach, am I saying that right? It's a commence to operation.
It's
Are the
actually a PFLI. We can start to cultivate plants.
Yep. So as we want to do a general term, once approved by the state for cultivation, if you want to put that, or the CCC, just so we have a starting point.
Sure. Other than that, you're okay with the sampling frequency?
No,
You're okay with
I understand it
the-
completely.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
So Pete, will they notify us upon the time that will start receiving that flow?
Yes, I believe, again, as I said, once they get their commencement date from the CCC, we'll probably be aware of that, and that's when we'll know that flow will be able to begin.
It just helps us be on the lookout at the plant if we start seeing any adverse
Yep.
effects.
And then again, to understand, just to kind of reiterate, the first 3 months, you're gonna be ramping up, correct? So we won't see full strength waste until after that 3-month time frame.
Correct.
Okay.
Pete, will they also be providing us the data as they, as it comes in, or will we looking to get it? At what frequency will they provide their ongoing analysis?
Typically, they give it to us as they receive it.
Okay.
I know, again, just to reference Treehouse hires a local engineer, McClure Engineering. They do the sampling, they create the table, and they email us the results, the table with the results on a weekly basis as they get the data back from the lab for the applicant. Again, that's not how you have to do it, but it's how this company does it.
No, that would simplify the process. I'm okay with that.
And again, I'm not saying it has to be McClure, it can be any engineering company, just someone independent, so they're on
Yep.
there on site.
No problem. Once, if you could, once you have those parameters that you would like us to test to, if you could just send it our way so we can put it out the bid, that'd be great.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
All right, so we got a motion and we have a second. We have a discussion. Let's give a roll call vote, Peter.
All right, Mr. Ridlack,
Aye.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
So again, I'll work up on writing that approval after I get some information from John, and I'll get that over to you gentlemen for review.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Take care. New business, Peter. Sewer abatement request 95 Osgood.
Yes, so the owner of 95 Osgood Road, Zach Moss, is requesting a sewer abatement for his current sewer bill. This is a new construction home that Zach purchased in October of 2020. The bills from January 1st, 2021 to April 1st, 2021 showed normal sewer use. The bill from 7/1 to October 4th showed 0 sewer use due to the MXU not working correctly. Where I changed the MXU in September, and the current sewer bill shows 17,000 cubic feet of usage, which is from April through October, or 6 months. Zach has said that he had an irrigation system installed in the summer to help his new lawn get established, and that the connection for the system is after the meter, and that a portion of this usage he's getting billed for was used outside. The billed usage of 17,000 cubic feet equates to approximately 3,000 cubic feet per month, which is pretty excessive for a single family home for what we see for averages. You do have the ability to abate a portion of this bill if you see fit. I believe Zach is here.
Yep. Yep, I'm here. Happy to answer any questions. I have been in contact with both my contractor and the folks that installed the irrigation line. I told them multiple times, but they had forgotten that I'm city sewer, but well water, and they admit to installing the irrigation line. They teed it off the wrong spot. That is scheduled to get fixed tomorrow. So this should not be an issue moving forward. But I mean, we have a pretty good sized yard, and it was getting watered heavily just because it was a strange year. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would appreciate any sort of relief that we could get here.
Russ, can we talk about past history?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe once in the past, Peter, we have been presented with something like this.
I think so. The last time that you gave an abatement like this was when the water line broke under a commercial business that had a water meter for sewer usage. And because the water leaked out, it didn't go down the sewer and broke and just leaked into the ground, you did grant an abatement for that.
And it's easy. It's easy to see that this is clearly something other than just sewer usage.
Yes, I think that pretty comfortable stating that 17,000 cubic feet of water usage did not get put into the sewer from this resident.
Correct. So what are we looking at, Peter? What's a reasonable number here?
I would propose maybe a 40% abatement, because then you'd bring it down to maybe 1,516 cubic feet per month, which I think is still a little high for a single family home, depending, how many people live there and how much water they use. But I think that the commission can feel comfortable that, it's probably a good place to start. If Zach would be acceptable to that.
Zach, what's your
I'm
thoughts
happy
on
to,
that?
I'm happy to take any relief you guys are willing to dish out this way. What's interesting is that I'm in a line of new construction on Osgood Road, and every single other house is plumbed the same way. So I've actually been in contact with my neighbor, who I think is at 83 Osgood, and they're regularly paying about $700 a month for sewer. So this is unfortunately not isolated to me, but I've been talking with my neighbors, so hopefully we're gonna, when they get their sprinkler systems installed, hopefully this will not become an issue moving forward. But unfortunately, it's not isolated to just our house.
Russ, you want to make a motion? Somebody make a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we give the 40% relief as discussed in this situation.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote, Peter.
All right, Mr. Ridlack,
Aye.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
All right, so 40% is approximately $605 relief. Sue will draft that up in the morning and have that ready for you guys to sign when you come and sign all the other bills and stuff. And Zach, as I mentioned before, this will show up as a credit. The current bill you have to pay in full.
Yep.
And this amount will show up as a credit on future bills.
Okay, I
And
appreciate
through
the
the
time.
chair, if I might, Peter, while we
Sure.
still have Zach on the line, is there a way, I'm not so sure how many houses in a row that Zach discussed were built in a similar fashion, plumbed the similar way. But if it is possible to send a note to the general contractor or the homeowners stating that there is a potential issue if they are doing sprinkler systems, be aware. Now's the time to correct that, not come before this board after you've been warned and advised to take precautions. Is that possible? Is that something
Yes.
completely over asking?
No, so just to give you a little bit of background, I think one of Zach's biggest problems is that the October bill or the January read was the July read was 0. So he went 6 months without being notified. So again, July, August, September, he watered heavily. I have received calls from other residents, other neighbors in that area after the July bill went out and kind of told them that what I told Zach, but they were able to kind of realize that before it went for 2 quarters and turned into such a big bill. The contractor, I think the work Zach had done was after he was in there. So the building contractor was not long gone, but it wasn't he wasn't the one doing it. Correct, Zach? You had an irrigation company come in.
Yeah, it's a frustrating part with my contractor. He installs the lawn and encourages us to water it, but then he also tells us that he does not install the gauge, assuming any sort of irrigation will be done. So it's a strange situation. So really, there's no way around this issue until you install an irrigation system, which is unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way it is at this point.
So I know I've been in contact with one of the neighbors who I know also had the irrigation system installed around a similar time. And they've also been watering quite a bit. I think, like I said, we were able to catch that before it went into the second quarter.
Yeah.
But Zach, if you are in contact with any of your neighbors who are having the same issue, just have them reach out to me.
Okay,
and we'll
I
see
can do
what
that.
we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, Peter, sewer rate study.
Yes, with the increase in the new Veolia operating agreement, I believe we should consider having a sewer rate study completed to make sure that we have enough revenues annually to cover our operating costs. I would also like them to review our metered billing rate and recommend if we should change to a tiered billing structure, which might help to promote conservation. Right now, we currently just bill a flat rate of 0.0872 cents per cubic foot. We have not completed a sewer rate study or had any type of fee increase other than surcharges since 2017. I have a proposal from the Abrahams Group to complete this study for $16,000. This fee is consistent with what you paid Pioneer Consulting back in 2017. I have attached a proposal from the Abraham Groups for your review. As I look at the revenues and review them with Sue, the annual revenues, I believe we have enough to cover our operating expenses for this fiscal year and possibly for the budgets I'm going to be showing you in the next few items. However, our current sewer rate, our current revenues are probably 40% based on surcharges. So if any of those users were to be able to do something, any type of pre-treatment or do anything with curtailing their usage or whatever, and those surcharges were to go down, that means our revenues would decrease, the flow may stay the same, and the cost to operate would stay the same. So we would have a shortfall. So I just want to make sure, again, the goal is to have our revenues fund our annual operating budget. So we're self-sufficient. We're not drawing from retained earnings or the stabilization fund. And I
Through the
think
chair, if I might, Peter.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Peter, what was the last increase in rate that the sewer department did?
October 2017, when I was first hired, they did a 9% increase on user fees, I believe it was.
Okay,
That was approved before I got here.
all right. And do you know the actual dollar amount that increased the revenue to? Roughly.
I do not.
Could you guess? 50, 100?
Yeah, no, give me one sec. If our revenues 1.3, based on today's revenue or those that
Just then is
2017
fine.
revenue?
Actual is fine if you had the number.
So 45,000.
45,000. So 45,000 a year based off 9% increase. So if we did a 5% increase, what would that be? 24,000?
No, because we have more
No, just-
revenues.
No,
Yeah.
just based off the old number, I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, so it'd be half of that, probably, yeah, 25,000.
Okay. We know that the cost of goods and services across the board have gone up for everything. And if we don't protect ourselves in some fashion or our infrastructure for the people who use it, then we're going to have big problems down the road, being we don't have the money to fix it and maintain it. When you talk about a split system, can you describe that a little bit further?
A tiered rate structure would be mostly what you see on all water billing, where for the first 500 cubic feet, it's one rate. And then that rate increases as your usage increases. And that way there, the less you use, the less you pay as far as your cost per cubic foot.
So a homeowner who continues to maintain the same rate or the average rate, they don't pay anymore. But someone who uses more water, being commercial application, they would pay slightly higher.
If you switch to a tiered structure like that, yes.
And can we determine that tiered structure on our own, or do we need the Abrahams group to do that?
I think to do it correctly and for me to feel truly comfortable with it, it would be beneficial to have the Abrahams group go through and do it.
You don't think that's something you can do?
I believe I could put something together that would get you close to a certain number in revenue that you want. But I think it would be better to have the professional assistance from them to do it. Yeah.
So my concern is if in 2017, we increased the rate by 9%, if we said we did half of that, then that would almost be what the study would be. So we'd be increasing, we'd be spending that money on increasing the rates because we did a study. If you understand what I'm saying. I never want to do a study and cost us more money than is reasonable, and then have it result in, okay, well, we definitely have to increase rates.
Yeah, I don't think this would do that. I think this would give you a good picture as to where we are. And my concern with me is if I was to do this without their assistance, I don't want to do an increase to do an increase and then just charge too much for whatever reason. So I think it's because it's hard. When you look at every year we have retained earnings and we're putting money aside every year. And the typical goal is that you set your operating budget so that you have 10% extra at the end of the year so that you can set that aside and use it for future capital projects like you mentioned. And we've been doing well with doing that, but we don't have the ability to really see the revenues to know when we look at our retained earnings, are they from user fees or are they from privilege fees or are they from extra charges? They just show up as $500,000 in retained earnings. So I like to think that we're comfortable. Our retained earnings have been good and we could probably stay here and maybe just do a straight 2% increase just to do an increase. But I think for me, I think it's better to hire someone like the Abrahams group to do a deep dive, seeing it's been 4 years. And the last time that a sewer rate study was done, the billing, I don't think was as accurate as it is now for the consultant to review. So I think we have, 3 years of good, accurate billing that the Abrahams group can review, see what we've been collecting for revenues, and then give you a real good picture of what they think any type of increase should be.
Peter, is this not something we have to, there's no time crunch on this, is there?
I would recommend that. No, my goal would be that you have this done so that you can implement any increases you'd want to make on July 1 of 2022. So it goes into effect for FY23.
So I'm just gonna throw this out there. I kind of agree with Russ. I hate to spend $16,000 on a study. Seeing how we have a little bit of time, can you try to put together this and see what it looks like? Bring it back to us, and then I guess let us make a decision on not doing a study and going off of what you have.
Yeah, I'll also have Matt Abrahams from the Abrahams group was unable to come tonight. I'll have him at the next meeting and maybe he can talk about more what he'll do that I won't. And then see if that adds the value to make you consider it. So yeah, I'll work on putting some more stuff together and going from there and seeing if I feel comfortable enough saying, you know what, we can do this tiered rate and it looks like this, and this is what we can look at collecting in revenue, then maybe we can keep it that simple.
Yeah, because like
Sounds-
Russ said, I hate to spend $16,000 on a study and we're gonna raise the rate by 32,000, you know?
Through the chair, if I might,
Go ahead, Russ.
it sounds as though the chair is as confident in our superintendent as I am.
I'm extremely confident in them. I'm
Fair
sure
enough.
we get it done.
I'll put some numbers together. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
We think you're
Thank you.
doing a good job down there too, Peter, and we know we can rely on you for stuff like this.
I appreciate that. Sue, bring your calculator tomorrow, the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
moving on. 2022 water master plan.
Yeah, so since I think our last meeting when we talked about the Buffinville public water supply project and maybe putting that on hold, I pivoted a little bit and spoke with Bob Mackey and Peter Newton to prepare a scope of work for the grant for FY22. I mean, as we've discussed in the past, John Santos, the owner of the Nature's Classroom, has stated that he would allow us access to his approximate 600 acres of property near the Southbridge to the town line and Route 169 to determine if there might be a viable public water supply well in the area. This scope of work will provide the funding for Bob and Peter to perform extensive research on that property and perform some test wells if there seems to be a possibly productive area. Peter Newton's here to go over the scope of work and answer any questions. And the one thing about this property that makes it kind of stand out is its proximity to our current water infrastructure. We wouldn't have to go miles to or spend millions of dollars to get to our current water infrastructure if there was a public water supply well there. There are a couple of other properties in town that we might be able to have access to as well, and I think we might be able to roll that into this approval as an alternate. But I think the priority, hopefully, to get it approved by DEP would be to focus on the Santos property and the acreage that's there.
Well, through the chair, if I might.
All right, Russ.
It's always been my long-term thought that we do need to have certain things in our back pocket, such as the availability of a water supply or water source in Charlton. Even if we do not choose to use it, most likely because of the expense entailed in the creation of water department and that expense entailed. However, I am in favor of finding those sources or potential sources and ruling it out, because maybe we go a couple places around Charlton and we ultimately realize, guys, this is just impossible. But in order to rule that out or say it's possible, we need to go through certain steps. And if you can accomplish this through some grant money, Peter, then I'm in favor. So I'd love to hear what's in front of us.
And as you all know, it's not always easy to get access to people's property to do this type of work. So the fact that, Mr. Santos has such a large parcel and was allowing us access is pretty interesting in itself. So with that, I guess, Peter, if I'll just turn it over to you and you can give us a little overview over what you found with your cursory look at the property.
Sure. So unlike overburden wells, bedrock wells are much more challenging to site. You all probably, most of you have, I'm sure, rock wells at home for your own domestic supply. Finding a well that can produce 3 to 5 gallons a minute is not that difficult. You need to intersect the fracture, and small fractures will provide that much. For a municipal scale water supply, finding fractures that can produce 20, 30, 50, 100 gallons a minute is a much more challenging endeavor. And it's not one that you embark upon by, hunt and peck method, so just by chance. Finding a well at 40 to 50 gallons a minute is, it takes a bit of effort to narrow down the search. Because if what we're drawing from in a rock well is fractures, and ideally multiple fractures that intersect and draw water from, from the soils that are above them. You can miss a fracture by 3 feet and you'll have nothing, and 3 feet to the right, you have a nice, high production well. The way we do that is we first try to identify features on the surface that look like they might correspond to buried fractures. A lot of fractures, I don't want to get into too much of the geologic history of New England, but New England used to be attached to Europe several times, and they came together and split apart and came together and split apart. And every time they came together, the basement rocks, the rocks underneath our feet, were compressed, folded, and cracked. There are particular orientations of those fractures generally that are sort of perpendicular to when these continents collided, where they split. There are also some local smaller fractures that are resulting from when the glaciers retreated. Well, the glaciers advanced a mile, 6,000 feet of ice pressed down on the rocks, cracked it, and when the glaciers melted and retreated, that rock lifted back up and cracked again. Those fractures tend to be smaller and where you get a lot of the domestic supplies, and they're closer to the surface. What we're looking for a municipal well is something where fractures, generally these older fractures that are much larger, can extend hundreds or thousands of feet, and in the horizontal plane, like north to south, for example. But also hundreds of feet in the vertical, down into the ground and up. And so those fractures, those large fractures, tend to manifest on the surface by either by linear features. So what we perform what's called a lineament analysis. We actually get 2 aerial photos that are taken from slightly different angles and look at them through stereo glasses, and the image on the ground on the photos becomes 3-dimensional, and we can see where there are linear features that would pop up through the stereo viewing. And what we're trying to find is where we see a few of those linear features that cross, we get one in this direction, we got one in this direction, and where we get that, if we can get to that intersection, there's a lot of microfracturing that goes on there, and those could be reasonably large fractures that can produce tens of gallons a minute, sometimes hundreds of gallons a minute. But it's a labor-intensive process. It's not something that most folks, and I don't have access to Deep Blue, the IBM supercomputer. Those things can probably pick this stuff out. But we use one aerial photo at a time, and we wander across the property, overlaying these aerial photos and looking at these stereo images and physically circling on these photos where we think we see linear features. Then we go out into the field and we see what we find when we're walking around out there. We can find bedrock outcrops in the area, and we can look at what's called the strike and the dip of fractures. And if those correspond to what we're seeing in the aerial photos, then we start saying, all right, this is a higher probability of finding a large scale bedrock water supply well. So the whole process of searching for a large scale bedrock well is it's iterative, and it is each step gets us closer to where we think we should drill. As you kind of know, the Buffinville, that overburden wells, if you know you have sand and gravels, you pretty much know you can get a well. And then there's other things you're looking at. But with a bedrock feature, you want to be as precise as possible where you set those wells. So the proposal that I gave to Bob, that Bob provided you guys, is to do some research, some published research. I've done some very preliminary research. There isn't a lot on the bedrock structure out there that's readily available at a scale that's appropriate. There's large scale maps that cover from Springfield to Worcester, but something that's at the scale of Charlton, for example, there isn't a lot available that we've identified. We still need to reach out to the state geologist and the US Geological Survey to see if they have anything in their archives that we might be able to find. So that's the first phase of that project. Seeing if there's any existing mapping information of the bedrock geology of this Santos property area, Charlton is specific, this Santos property in general, specifically. Then we'll do the lineament analysis with the, acquiring the aerial photos. If we can get multiple years of photos, that's even better because we can see how vegetation has changed over time. Sometimes that indicates where water might be. So we'll do that. We'll get some favorability zones based on the lineament analysis. Then we'll go out and we'll field survey. We'll look and see if we can identify bedrock outcrops in the area that help either support or contradict what we've evaluated from the aerial photos. And if all that information leads us to a reasonable degree of confidence that there is likely to be fractures there, we will, phase 3 is to go out and do some drilling. We've budgeted for 2 rock wells. Now, the reason we want to drill is because you can have large fractures that are filled with silt and don't pump a lick. So we want to verify that even if we do find fractures, those fractures are water, they're transmissible. They are open and water can flow through them. A lot of these bedrock wells end up being no good because they're full of silt that over time, depending on how the fractures were formed, if there a lake happened to form on top of an exposed fracture, that lake, the sediment in that lake settles into the fractures and plugs them up. So we won't know that until we actually put a well in the ground. So, and then the fourth phase of that is if we find a good location or, we drill a well and it looks promising, we will do some preliminary water quality testing so we have an idea of whether it's, suitable for public water supply. So that's a nutshell.
Perfect.
Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
So this is all paid by grant?
So the route to take would be if you approve this scope of work tonight, I'll submit it to the Mass DEP and to Michelle Higgins, who's been our grant correspondent, and ask her to approve the scope of work to be funded from the FY22 allotment. I believe there's $200,000 in the FY22 allotment that she can fund this from. The reason we haven't done this yet is because, again, we're still working on figuring out what we wanted to do on the Buffinville project. So now that we're through that, we can pivot to this and ask her to approve this scope of work. And then if she approves it, Peter and Bob can hit the ground running, and this will have to be done by June 30th because it will be funded from FY22.
Through the chair, if I might.
Go ahead, Russ.
So, Mr. Newton, if we approve this grant funding this evening, and the grant gets approved, you're able to do the work. This will rule out or rule in and give us very specific results without any additional spending for this property, correct?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yeah. That's right. I mean, the nature of bedrock wells is we're trying to increase our chances of success. So, if we find a good source, then rule in. If we don't find a good source, it probably doesn't exist, but I wouldn't say categorically that we didn't miss something. I know that sounds a little bit, but yeah, in a sense, you're right. You're correct. There's no further expenditures at this time that would be required until you decided to proceed, if that's the way you want it to go.
And provided that, what size well would would we be drilling on the property?
So typically at this phase, it would be a 6-inch well if it was decided, because that's just a typical size that the rock well drillers have for boring. If it was promising, or if the preliminary testing was good, and you decided to proceed with permitting of it, we would ream it to 8-inch.
What is the cost difference to do 8-inch initially?
I didn't solicit quotes for an 8-inch. It's significantly more volume of material to remove, and it'll go a fair amount slower. It's typically going to be the same rig. It's just the 6-inch drill bit goes down much faster than an 8-inch. So it's more time on site. So, you know, it might be 15 or 20% more for the drilling costs. Typically for a municipal well, that's just, it's done 6-inch, then reamed if it's suitable.
All right, and provided that this well, let's just say we needed a yield of 20 gallons a minute or more to make it viable. Is that a reasonable standard to say, well, maybe that's a starting point?
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
anything less, we would say, no, we're not really interested. It's not viable. Is
That
that a
would be up-
reasonable statement?
yeah, that would be up to you guys to decide. I would give you my recommendation, you know, what my opinion is.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So simply
I mean,
what
I
I'm-
know,
what I'm
I know,
asking-
I'm sorry, Russ, I'm sorry.
That's
ahead.
okay. Sorry. Simply what I'm asking is if we had 5 gallons a minute, now it's definitely not reasonable to us, but here it is for the property owner. Here you have a well that's viable at 5 gallons a minute.
Yeah,
Reasonable, fair. Okay, we explored your property. Didn't work out for us, but we're leaving you with a well that produces 5 gallons a minute. It's a potential.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so whatever work we do on site, whatever type of data or paperwork or reports Mr. Newton creates will be left and will be, if we're not able to develop the site or find a well, will be left to the homeowner, to the property owner.
Yes. So then Mr. Santos knows that, okay, we're going to come and explore on his property. Hopefully at a minimum, that's what he walks away with. At a best case scenario for the town, we would find a source that we could potentially use, and then be able to use that somewhere down the road if we in fact went in that direction.
Yeah, I think if the only other step, I guess, again, not related to the work that Peter or Bob will do, is if the DEP was to approve this request, I think we need to identify a cost for the property if the town were to purchase it from Mr. Santos before we begin, much like we did with the Buffinville property. But
Well,
that's an aside from
I
this.
think that's a tough, I understand your direction, Peter. I think it's a very tough position because of where the well would be located and sited and how much offset distance you're going to need or protective radius, right?
Well, I think the protective radius for a public water supply that produces any more than 50,000 gallons per day is 400 feet, correct, Peter?
Correct. 70 gallons a minute, 100,000 gallons a day. Yes. 400 feet.
So you're 400 feet, it's, if it's a perfect square, you're right around 10 acres, maybe a little bit
It's
more.
11 and a half acres.
So I think we can identify that with Mr. Santos just to do some type of agreement. So I don't want to spend this money, go in there, find the holy grail of a well, and all of a sudden Mr. Santos says, okay, I want $1 million for my property for 12 acres. So I
Absolutely.
think we do need to negotiate something beforehand. And yeah, I definitely identify, maybe the maximum amount that we need. Say maybe it's 15 acres with some type of easement to get access to that parcel on his property. And then I identify a cost for that, I guess. So we're not going in blind.
So you'll take tandem paths on that.
Yes, I don't want to go that far with Mr. Santos if we don't get the funding from Mass DEP. And
Sure.
kind of waste my time doing that. So again, once we get, if you guys are in favor of making this pivot and approving this scope of work. I'll forward it to Mass DEP, and I'll probably start that discussion with Mr. Santos at the same time. So both things kind of start taking place.
Do we have to be property specific in the grant funding with DEP?
I was only in hopes of getting them interested, because my concern was that I wanted them to be aware, but I think being property specific helps to show the proximity of this to our current infrastructure. And I think from here, depending on what Peter and Bob find, we can pivot again from here to other parcels that might be available to us throughout town.
Excellent. Okay.
And then again, if there are other smaller parcels in town, and again, Peter and Bob are on the process of reviewing this. If we don't get grant funding from it, maybe their cost to kind of do it, to review a smaller portion, we can self-fund that from some of our stabilization funds or from some of our operating budget as an aside to this part of it. So I think what if DEP approves this, it'll be easier to pivot to other properties as well.
So you need a motion for such.
Yes, in order to submit, I don't want to submit, I'd like to be able to submit this to Michelle Higgins saying that, the Water Sewer Commission approved this scope of work and we're asking for funding to get this going.
Through the chair, if you'd
Go
like,
ahead.
I'll make a motion that we have Peter put together the petition for the grant funding to DEP and coordinate and negotiate with Mr. Santos a potential contract for the purchase of property in relationship to a potential well.
Second that.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Peter.
Mr. Ridlack,
Aye.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
Nice seeing you, Peter. Thanks for
You
coming.
too. You too. Hopefully I
Thank you,
see you in
Peter.
person soon.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Peter.
Yep. Good night.
All right, where are we here? Let's see, the water and sewer budget review for 2023, Peter.
Yes, so the finance director is looking to have our FY23 budgets by December 31st. The FY23 fiscal year 2023 covers the period from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. These budgets will be reviewed by the select board and the finance committee before being presented at the annual town meeting in May of 2022. I have attached copies of both budgets for you to review. The water budget is pretty much even to what we submit to what we had for FY22. And the sewer budget, the only thing that has changed in the sewer budget, major change is the Veolia operating cost. So if you are to look, I guess we can start with the water, as that's kind of our smaller budget. You can see on the left of the sheet, it shows what was approved in previous fiscal years. And you'll see on the right what I've proposed for FY23. The top part of the budget, as far as salaries, payroll related expenses, all that stuff is pretty much put in by the finance director. In the water, there are no salaries for myself or Sue, as there is not much revenue coming in for water. And most of our work is done for the sewer. The commissioner's salaries are split between both the water and sewer budget. So as you get down to services and supplies, you'll see our maintenance expenses is level funded. at 10,000 in case we need to buy some materials to do some minor repairs or some minor upkeep. Engineering expenses level funded at $10,000. I don't believe we've used much of these in the last few years. Legal expenses level funded at 15,000. Again, haven't used much of this in the last few years. Training level funded at 2,000. I do use this for personal training, for water and wastewater training, to get training contact hours so I can renew my licenses, stay up to breast with what's going on in the industry. General insurance, we don't really have a say in that. Capital outlay, we fund at $50,000. Just in case there's any, water main repairs that need to be done, we can go ahead and fund them from this line item, making our total water budget approximately $96,000. We do get revenue from the town of Southbridge on an annual basis based on a percentage of connection fees they collect on our behalf. Typically, our revenues from Southbridge average $40,000 to $50,000, and we fund the remaining $50,000 from sewer retained earnings. Water retained earnings. So we usually don't use most of this budget. So again, as I said, this budget is pretty much more straightforward.
You need a motion on this, Peter?
If the board would be inclined, yes, if that way there I can send it to the finance director stating, here is our initial approved budget from the Water and Sewer Commission. Just because you were to approve it tonight does not mean that we can't make changes to it in the future. Unless there's some questions, but again, at least as far as the water goes, it's pretty straightforward and consistent with what we've done over the last few fiscal years.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, anybody got any questions? Guys, hello.
Looks like we lost Jack.
Paul, Russ, you guys have any questions about this?
No, I'll make a motion that we send that as printed. Thank you for writing it up, Peter.
You bet.
I will second that.
All right, roll call vote, Peter.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
All right,
And
moving
then-
on to the chapter 61A release.
We still have the sewer budget.
Oh, where am I? Oh, here we are. Sorry, Peter.
That's okay.
You wanted
So-
separate motions on that?
Yeah, just in case you have questions, it's unless you want to just approve them both for us, it's up to you guys, but
Yeah, no, I'll make a motion. We accept it as printed or send it as printed. Sorry.
okay.
Can I get a second? Cam, thank you. Roll call vote, Peter.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
All right.
Sorry, moving on to the chapter 61A release.
Yes, so we have the Board of Selectmen has a request to move approximately 10 acres of a larger 45-acre parcel of land from chapter 61A on Southbridge Road. This parcel is located behind the Incom building, between Incom and the solar farm behind it. They are leasing this property, I believe, to the LNG facility. And as part of this request, the Board of Selectmen has a right of first refusal for the property on behalf of the town. And the Board of Selectmen asks the departments in town to make a recommendation on whether or not there's a need for them to exercise this right. Small parcel, I don't see it having any benefits to us as a department. So I'd recommend that you make a motion to not to recommend that the Board of Selectmen do not exercise their right of first refusal.
Well, I'll just based off our conversation earlier, requiring 11.4 acres of land for an offset distance, I'd say that rules this out automatically for what we'd ever be looking at it for. So I'll make a motion that we let the Board of Selectmen know that we would not ask them for any right of first refusal on this property. So you have no one.
Can I get a second?
Well, I'll second that.
All right, thank you, Kim. Roll call vote, Peter.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
Business,
All right,
Peter,
old
the
business.
grants.
Yeah, we just have a couple updates on a couple of grants. The HVAC grant that we received from the Green Communities will be starting, it's supposed to be starting this week, but they had a problem sourcing some materials, so they'll be here next week. This is the $48,000 grant that will replace the HVAC systems in our office, lab, and in Violia's office in the plant. So hopefully that gets going soon. We'll be good to go for the winter. And the second is a newly issued grant from Maya, our insurance company. And they'll be providing about $5,000 in a grant for safety equipment for our operators to use. The gear will consist of a confined space entry kit and 2 hydrogen sulfide detection meters. So those will be coming soon. Things are moving forward. And lastly, waterline construction update. The school loop, the final date for residents to request to be connected from ExxonMobil is April 6th, 2022. Kleinfelder is continuing to mail out notices to the residents who have not committed already. And they are still trying to get people and work with people to allow them to connect. So far, they have 146 signed agreements to connect. 127 of those connections have been completed, and 121 of those are activated. So with winter arriving, there's going to be limited work taking place until the next construction season.
What is, through the chair, if I might,
Yeah,
what is the number of agreements not signed, Peter? Do you know?
I believe it was 17 or 18.
Okay, so it's been narrowed down significantly, and there is a very, we could say, short list at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm gonna say probably 40 to 50 customers, 40 to 50 residents who are unknown.
Yep. Excellent.
And
and
that's
any
who are
major
the-
issues, Peter, as with the 121 that are activated, anything go awry?
There were some water quality issues towards the end of August into September when we had a little bit of, when the groundwater warmed up and there was some detention time in the line. So other than that, no, everything's been really good. As far as the contractor working with homeowners, we've received minimal complaints, actually really no complaints as far as their work or
Okay, good.
dealing with them on that taking place outside. They've been very responsive. You'll see a lot of new driveways along the school loop, so that they've been very responsive to the homeowners' request for that. If they had to dig up a portion of their driveway to get the water line to their home. And the plumbers and electricians who are working inside the home have also been really good. So we really have had minimal complaints. Again, because of all the rain we got in August and September, and because of the way Southbridge treats their surface water, it did affect water quality at that time. So we did have complaints from that. But again, Whitewater, the Board of Health, we worked through it with those residents to try and alleviate those concerns. And now that the colder weather has come, the groundwater has cooled down, the chlorine residual is better, the water quality is seen, that water quality issue has gone away.
They actually switch reservoirs, don't they, Peter?
They do, and that sometimes leads to the problem, I believe. So I think it's, unfortunately, it's a seasonal thing. And again, I think in reading what other communities have been facing who deal with surface water, the heavy rains that we've received forces a lot of organic growth into their reservoirs as that rainwater drains into the reservoir from higher elevations. It just kind of washes a bunch of stuff into the lake. And as they kind of use that water, they can't, it's difficult to filter all that out, I guess.
Yeah, through the chair, if I might.
Yep.
So in past years where we haven't had a lot of rain in the summer and they used one reservoir that didn't have these problems, there was no issues. Now you get a year where you've got tons of rainwater and now you have that issue and now it affects the quality. It's probably not going to happen again for a long time. Let's hope not, right?
Correct.
Perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
other business. Anybody got anything? All right, next meeting.
That's up for discussion. If we're gonna stay Tuesdays, we can go the first Tuesday in January, which would be the 4th.
Perfect.
Good to me.
Sounds good.
2022. All right.
All right.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
There you go. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Perfect. I heard a couple of them.
All right, roll call vote, Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings,
Aye.
and Mr. Cantwell.
Aye.
Thank you,
Tomorrow-
everyone. Have a great
Tomorrow morning?
holiday.
See you tomorrow, Sue.
Thank you.
Tomorrow
Thanks.
morning. Thank you.
John and
Great.
Benny, thank you guys. Take care.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, everyone.